Hello and welcome to the history of Babylon 5. Today's episode we continue the history of Jakar, subtitled Ambassador Jakar, although he already was an ambassador in first part. And here we go. Jakar quickly realized that the attack on the Narn outpost can only have been done by a new race, or a very old one. He spends many weeks searching along the Outer Rim, discovering something was moving, gathering its forces, on dark and distant worlds that should have been lifeless. He quietly returns to Babylon 5 after the rest of his expedition is wiped out. Natoth immediately notices a change in him, and he replies that he has stared into the abyss and has been altered. He calls for a meeting of the Security Council in an attempt to warn them that all of their races stand on the edge of extinction. Ambassador Malari rebukes his claims, and Jakar admits even the regime is skeptical, as Jakar has no real proof. He has been able, however, to convince his government to send a warship to a planet far out on the rim, Zahadu, which is supposed to be completely lifeless. However, the ship is destroyed as soon as it exits hyperspace, which the regime attributes as an accident. Jakar suspects Malari may have somehow sent a warning, but lacking proof he can do nothing. Part of Jakar's conclusions are drawn from his faith in the Book of Jaquan, which tells about an ancient enemy 1,000 years ago from the darkest corners of space that was so powerful it nearly overwhelmed the stars themselves. When a human cryo ship arrives at the station, it brings with it a malicious, invisible creature that begins to terrorize the station. Jakar is deeply interested when members of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds mention rumors and stories from their own histories about an ancient terror. The description of the creature also conforms to the writings from the Book of Jaquan. Jakar is invited to Malari's Day of Ascension ceremony. All guests at the event are required to be barefoot, so Jakar purposely wears boots in order to convey an insult. Malari, however, is in far too good of a mood to be bothered by his rival, and laughs about not being insulted at all by his Narn friend. Malari nearly dies when an old Centauri artifact given to him as a gift by his third wife, Marielle, ends up being an old booby trap. While Marielle protests her ignorance of it, Jakar, who has had an ongoing affair with her, quickly realizes that she did intend to murder her husband, but agrees not to be a rumor monger. He warns Marielle that if he can figure it out, so can Malari. Despite his ailing health, Centauri Emperor Turin wishes to come to Babylon 5. Jakar angrily confronts Sheridan about such a visit, declaring Turan is a monster and a criminal for the crimes his family has committed during the Centauri occupation. Jakar states it is merely a technicality, that Turan himself actually did nothing during the occupation. Sheridan states he will not consider Jakar's request, eager for the Centauri Emperor to come. He encourages Jakar to see this as an opportunity to open up a dialogue, but Jakar storms out. Instead of a dialogue, Jakar plots an assassination of the Emperor. He quietly contacts his government, which secretly goes along with the plan, telling him to strike during the official reception before the Emperor can deliver his intended speech. Jakar dictates his last will and testament, declaring he is taking the action without knowledge or approval of the regime, or Natoth. He puts the rest of his affairs in order, leaving his copy of the Book of Jaquan to Natoth, in the hopes of her eventual conversion. Slipping a dagger into his glove, he goes to the reception and plans to strike. However, Turan suffers a major heart attack after he arrives on the station, but before he can reach the reception. As Jakar hopes, Turan may recover enough for him to finish him off. He receives a visit from Dr. Stephen Franklin. The doctor is there with a message from Turan, given to Franklin to ensure that it would be delivered. Expecting a threat, Jakar is taken back when Franklin tells him that the Emperor has come there to apologize in person to the Narn for everything that he has done against them by his people, and especially his family. He has come to admit that they were wrong and hope for a new era of peace. Jakar is overwhelmed. He seeks out Malari, finding him in the Zocalo, and insists having a drink with him. Jakar buys them both a drink and toasts to the health of the Emperor, and to Malari's own health, much to the shock of Malari himself. Unfortunately, the hope for peace dies before the Emperor. An all-out attack on the Narn colony of Quadrant 14 suddenly occurs. The first transmissions are confused, but a follow-up expedition confirms the destruction of the military outposts and the presence of the Centauri ships securing the planet. The regime sends word to Jakar on an open channel, allowing everyone to pick it up, including the CNC. Jakar, correctly guessing Malari knew about the attack, even as he drank with him in the Zocalo, is thrown into a rage. He injures several security guards on his way to Malari's quarters. Before he can get there, he is confronted by Sheridan and a team of armed security guards. Sheridan insists Jakar stand down, and after his rage almost overwhelms him, Jakar collapses in sorrow. He spends the next several hours in meditation prior to a meeting of the full Babylon 5 assembly. At the assembly, Jakar relays a message that the regime has officially declared war against the Centauri Republic. The war quickly goes against the Narn regime, due to their initial losses before the war and their lack of support among the other races. The Narn quickly find themselves on the defensive. The Centauri are merciless in their attacks. Jakar appeals to Sheridan for the Earth Alliance to get involved, believing that if Earth takes a stand, other races will follow. He also makes an emotional appeal to Delenn, saying that he will beg if he has to for the Minbari to provide aid. Delenn tells Jakar that his people's actions in the past make it difficult for anyone to trust their word now. She also states that her people are tired of war. Meanwhile, tension among the Narn population is growing. One Narn is shot and killed by a station security officer after he had been attacked by Centauri. Jakar confronts Sheridan, who tells Jakar he is going to do what he can to convince Earth to support the Narns, but he needs Jakar to keep his people in control. Jakar appeals to the Narn on the station, but some of the younger ones believe he does not have the stomach for war. Despite his orders, they murder the Centauri, who had attacked the now dead Narn, and plan a massacre of all Centauri on the station. Fortunately, Natath learns of their plans and warns Jakar. He confronts the leader of the group, telling him that he has challenged his own leadership and there must be a fight. The two engage in hand-to-hand combat, with Jakar emerging victorious. The other Narn stands down. The defeated Narn manages to injure Jakar with a poisoned dagger, but Jakar is able to treat the wound and the poison. Jakar then receives word from Sheridan asking for a meeting. To his disappointment, he learns that the Earth Alliance will not get involved. However, Sheridan and Delenn have both promised to provide secret aid in the form of food and medical supplies, in addition to smuggling civilians out of hostile areas. Jakar thanks them for what aid they are giving, but once alone breaks down weeping over the plight of his people. The station itself becomes a minor battleground in the war when the Narn and Centauri merchant ships open fire on one another, requiring the station's fighters to subdue them. Jakar announces that the Centauri have violated the peace of Babylon 5 by smuggling weapons through it, a claim that the Centauri deny. Jakar agrees to an interview by Cynthia Torxman, an ISN reporter who is doing a segment on Babylon 5. He talks about the Centauri occupation and his own personal history. He also denies a report that the Narn have lost 6 of their last 7 battles, as Centauri propaganda. Another skirmish appears in orbit when a Narn ship attacks a Centauri battlecruiser, leading to the destruction of both. The Narn continue to be pushed back over the next several months. Jakar is visited by his uncle, who tells him that they have lost all their holdings in 3 key sectors. Confused, Jakar asks why he has heard none of this in his daily briefings. Justin explains that the Kari is perpetrating the myth that the regime is holding its own. He tells Jakar of a desperate plan the regime has come up with to slow the Centauri advance. They will assemble the bulk of their remaining forces to an all-out attack of the Centauri supply line of the world Gorash 7. Capture of this planet will force the Centauri to halt, prolonging the war indefinitely and allowing the Narn to regroup and rebuild their defenses. Jakar points out the danger of the plan. The Narn homeworld will be left with only a skeletal defense. Justin acknowledges the danger, but proceeds anyways, feeling that they have no choice, bidding his nephew farewell. Jakar is contacted by Dr. Franklin and asked to come to the med lab. A transport of injured Narn civilians have recently arrived from one of the fallen colonies. Franklin tells Jakar that the survivors only escaped because the Centauri pulled out before they were finished securing the planet, something highly atypical of the Centauri. A few Narns had been interrogated by Centauri officers regarding the Narn defenses. Jakar assesses that the Centauri must be planning on attacking the homeworld far sooner than they had expected. He contacts Justin, begging him to return the fleet, but Justin is not convinced by the evidence and proceeds with the operation. Jakar prays long and desperate, fearing the inevitable. The attack is a complete failure, leading to a total loss of the fleet. Soon thereafter, a massive Centauri strike force does indeed attack Narn itself, quickly overrunning its orbital defenses and beginning the orbital bombardment with mass drivers. Millions died over the course of the next few days, and most of the planet's infrastructure collapses. The regime had no choice but to surrender. Their last order is for Jakar to seek sanctuary on Babylon 5. Overwhelmed with emotion, Jakar slowly seeks out Captain Sheridan and makes the request. News of the bombing initially sparks riots on Babylon 5, prompting a lockdown of the station. Ambassador Malari, off station the entire time, finally returns and asks for a meeting of the Babylon 5 assembly. The Security Council and the League quickly convene. Malari announces that the Narn have offered a total and unconditional surrender to the Centauri Republic. He announces the terms of the war, which includes the formal stripping of Jakar's rank as ambassador and call for his return to Narn to stand trial with the rest of the Kari. Captain Sheridan announces he has granted Jakar's sanctuary, and the move is supported by Delenn and the Minbari Federation. Malari grudgingly acknowledges that he cannot override their decision, but rather angrily insists Jakar leave the council. Jakar slowly stands up, but before he leaves, he speaks one last time. No dictator, no invader can hold an imprisoned population by force of arms forever. There is no greater power in the universe than the need for freedom. Against that power, governments and tyrants and armies cannot stand. The Centauri learned this lesson once. We will teach it to them again. Though it take 1,000 years, we will be free. Jakar, 2259. Hey, thank you for watching part 2 of Jakar. Stay tuned for part 3, Citizen Jakar. Special thanks to the Babylon Project and all contributors for all information you heard today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you can. If you have, thank you, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.